Welcome, newly promoted managers. First off, massive congratulations. You've worked incredibly hard to get here, putting in those long hours and delivering the exact results that earned you that brand new title. But today, yeah, we're pushing the champagne aside. Welcome to an intense, real talk whiteboard coaching session in this explainer. We're going to look closely at what this job actually entails, and spoiler alert, it might not be exactly what you think.
Okay, let's dive right into a massive management paradox. Have you ever had a moment where you delivered a really strong quarter, your team hit their numbers, the project landed exactly on time, and yet, somehow, your boss seems distinctly disappointed, and your team, they feel completely underappreciated. So why does a win sometimes feel like an absolute failure? What actually went wrong there?
Well, to answer that, let's look at Module 1, the real success equation, and why good work isn't enough. As your coach, I've got to break some tough news to you right out of the gate. In leadership, success and failure, they aren't objective measurements. They're basically just perceptions. Think about these two scenarios. On one hand, you deliver extraordinary results against modest expectations. Boom, you're a hero. But on the other hand, if you deliver good results against extraordinary expectations, you're suddenly perceived as a failure. It's the exact same level of hard work, but it leads to completely opposite career outcomes based entirely on what people expected before the work even started. So, here's your new definition of reality. Perceived success is simply the gap between expectation and outcome. Seriously, I want you to treat this as the absolute golden rule of our playbook. It's arguably the single most underappreciated principle in leadership. If you don't master this gap, I promise you're going to spend your entire career confused and pretty frustrated about why your absolute best efforts just keep falling incredibly short in the eyes of others. Let's see how this gap actually plays out on the floor in Module 2, the invisible workplace conflict, or what happens when shared norms simply don't exist. So, you can do literally everything right and still face an unhappy team. Let's take a super standard client email scenario. The manager's view is usually that someone should reply immediately, right? Even just to acknowledge your seat. But the team's view? Completely different. They think it's way better to wait a day or two until a really thorough, well-researched response is ready. And the thing is, neither approach is inherently wrong. But without alignment, you, the manager, grow frustrated because the team seems unresponsive. Meanwhile, the team grows resentful because you seem to be micromanaging. It just breeds this toxic mutual frustration. So how do we actually fix this? The solution is embarrassingly simple. Assume nothing, be explicit. From day one of any new working relationship, you've got to state your communication standards explicitly. Talk about response times, talk about escalation protocols. Now, yeah, your inner critic might be screaming that this feels a bit overbearing, but as your coach, I'm telling you right now, it absolutely prevents a slow, poisonous accumulation of unspoken frustrations down the line. Which brings us right to Module 3, avoiding the promotion trap and the hidden danger of the same good work. Let's map out a trap I see solid performers fall into all the time. Year 1, they do good work and get rewarded. Year 2, they do good work and, again, get rewarded. So naturally, by year 3, they just assume doing the exact same good work is going to yield a promotion. But then, they hit a brick wall. So what happened? Well, the goalposts moved. They were actually expected to take on way more responsibility and expand their scope, but because literally no one ever managed that expectation, they had absolutely no idea. The fallout from skipping that expectation conversation is pretty severe. It quickly erodes workplace trust, it breeds team cynicism, and ultimately, it drives away your absolute top talent. Failing to explicitly tell your team that the definition of great work has evolved, it's going to force out the exact people who would have gladly risen to the challenge, if only they knew what the challenge actually was. Okay, let's pivot to our offensive strategy in the playbook. Module 4, setting the standard, and why clarity is not rigidity. All right, here is your 4-step offensive action plan, because it's entirely on you to be deliberate about defining what success looks like. First, state expectations clearly. Second, explain your reasoning behind them. Third, and this is a massive one, explicitly define what great performance is versus merely adequate performance. And fourth, revisit these boundaries often. For example, if speaking up in meetings is non-negotiable for you, you literally have to say so out loud. If you follow these steps, when things inevitably go wrong, nobody can claim ignorance about what was expected. I really need you to internalize this core philosophy. Clarity is the foundation that allows genuine autonomy. Some new managers resist setting expectations because they don't want to seem rigid or bossy. We've got to reframe that right now. Setting expectations is not about rigidity at all. It's about providing safe, clear boundaries. Because once your team knows exactly where the fences are, they're genuinely free to make their own decisions within that space, without any fear of stepping on a landmine. But managing down is only half the battle. Let's pivot to Module 5, How to Manage Up and the Art of the Upward Conversation. Managing expectations with your own executive boss might actually be the most crucial conversation you have in your new role. You need to proactively tell them three things: what they can expect in the near term, what they can expect in the medium term, and crucially, what they should not expect right now. Doing this forces your boss to articulate their expectations out loud, and that gives you the critical chance to moderate their unrealistic assumptions before they harden into permanent benchmarks that you're going to be measured against. To see why this upward defense is so vital, let's look at a real-world turnaround. A leader was hired to fix a broken business unit. The boss just assumed it would take, say, 3 to 5 months. But in month 1, the new leader forced an expectation-setting meeting and reset that timeline to a highly realistic 12 months. And because they did that, month 6 wasn't viewed as a failure. Instead, by month 13, the turnaround was a celebrated success. It's the exact same outcome, but a completely different perception. That is the true power of managing up. All right, as we wrap up this whiteboard session, I really want you to burn this rule into your memory. Whether an outcome is perceived as success or failure is almost entirely a function of how far it lands from what was expected. This is the absolute bottom line of our explainer today. If you master this gap, you're going to find that a massive amount of workplace frustration simply evaporates, not because the actual work changed, but because the expectations were set right from the very start. So, I'll leave you with this provocative final question. How will you manage expectations tomorrow? Because the minute you walk into the office, you have a choice. You can let invisible norms and shifting goalposts completely dictate your career, or you can run this playbook, sit down with your team and your boss, and explicitly define what success looks like. The choice is yours, manager. Get out there and set the standard.